You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
It's a great way to be connected with the sport that we love and get to see, I have been really lucky to get to do, a number of really big events, Olympic Games, Pan American Games, World Championships, World Cup finals. And, I get to see the best horses and riders in the world competing, and there's nothing better than that. And then I get to talk about them and really say whatever I want. So that's also kind of fun.
Welcome to the Practical Horseman podcast, featuring conversations with respected riders, industry leaders, and horse care experts. The show is co-hosted by Practical Horseman editors, and our goal is to inform, educate, and inspire. I'm Sandy Olenek, and this week's episode is with Charlotte Skinner-Robson, a longtime announcer at the Kentucky 3-Day event. As I mentioned to Charlotte when asking her about the podcast interview, I had been hearing her announce at Kentucky for many years. Then, when I was at a U.S. Hunter Jumper annual meeting, I heard her talking in a committee meeting. It took me a few minutes to place her voice, but then the light bulb finally went off. Since then, I've been intrigued about her background in show jumping, yet announcing at such a big 3-day event as Kentucky. During our conversation, Charlotte and I, of course, talk about Kentucky, as well as announcing in general. In addition to Kentucky, she has announced at the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, 3 FEI World Cup finals in dressage, the World Equestrian Games in Kentucky in show jumping and eventing, and the 2 Pan American Games in all 3 disciplines. As with many things in life, there's a lot more to announcing than you might think, which we dive into. In addition to announcing, Charlotte wears many hats in the industry, one being a licensed official for both the FEI and U.S. Equestrian Federation. These include serving as an FEI Level 3 jumper judge and a USEFR Big R jumper judge. She also has her FEI Level 1 steward license, is a certified jumper schooling supervisor, and is a clinician for the USHGA Jumper Judges Clinics. Another role for Charlotte is competition manager. She was a senior member of the management team at the 1992 FEI World Cup final in Del Mar, California. She managed the FEI North American Youth Championships in 1998, 2000, and 2008, and the Colorado Summer Circuit in Parker, Colorado from 1993 to 2010. Currently, she serves as LEG Shows and Events Operations Manager and Competitions Manager for all of the Hunter Jumper shows at the Colorado Horse Park, which she has done since 2020. Finally, Charlotte is very involved in sports governance. She is the chair of the USEF Awards Committee and serves on its International Disciplines Council and Jumping Sports Committee. She is USHGA Vice President on its Board of Directors and Executive Committee and is chair of the USHGA Jumper Working Group. Charlotte and I touch on all of these roles. And what I love about our chat is her behind-the-scenes snapshots of all of these different facets of the industry. Before getting into the discussion with Charlotte, I'd like to share a word from this episode's sponsor, Purina Animal Nutrition. Level up your horse's performance this season with choices from Purina Animal Nutrition. From Purina Ultium Competition Formula to Purina Impact Pro Performance and everything in between, Purina has the right option for your horse, including supplements like Purina Super Sport Amino Acid Supplement, Purina Amplify High Fat Supplement, and Purina Outlast Gastric Support Supplement. There are many choices for optimal nutrition when you choose Purina, all backed by science. Level up your performance this season and put Purina's research to the test. Ask for Purina at your local feed retailer today. Now let's jump right into the conversation with Charlotte, where she talks about announcing at Kentucky and other big competitions. Before getting into the discussion with Charlotte, I'd like to share a word from this episode's sponsor, Purina Animal Nutrition. Level up your horse's performance this season with choices from Purina Animal Nutrition. From Purina Ultium Competition Formula to Purina Impact Pro Performance and everything in between, Purina has the right option for your horse, including supplements like Purina Super Sport Amino Acid Supplement, Purina Amplify High Fat Supplement, and Purina Outlast Gastric Support Supplement. There are many choices for optimal nutrition when you choose Purina, all backed by science. Level up your performance this season and put Purina's research to the test. Ask for Purina at your local feed retailer today. Now, let's jump right into the conversation with Charlotte, where she talks about announcing at Kentucky and other big competitions.
I've been announcing there, I want to say since I think my first time there was the year before the Atlanta Olympic Games. Maybe it might have been 2 years before the Atlanta Olympic Games. And interestingly, Land Rover, then Rolex, was actually the first 3-day event I have ever been to.
Wow.
I'd seen them sort of peripherally at the Young Rider Championships, but I was doing show jumping, there, and it was happening at the same time. I wasn't really participating in it, except I did announce a little bit of the show jumping day for the eventing. But actually, the first time I ever attended a 3-day event was Land Rover, then Rolex.
Oh, wow. You just jumped right in.
Sort of trial by fire, yes.
Yeah.
I did a lot of studying on eventing. I read their rule book, the FEI eventing rules, through like 5 times, tried to get sort of the vernacular down so I would not sound like a complete show jumping person, but I still did. And people thought it was funny. They kind of enjoyed it.
That's funny. Yeah, I think when I first started, my background's hunter jumper, and when I first started working at Practical Horseman, I had to learn that they didn't really call events shows, and that actually took me a long time to get that vernacular.
Right.
So, yeah. So, I guess, what do you like about announcing in general, and especially at such a big event like Kentucky?
Well, it's really exciting. Number one, you get the best seat in the house to watch, some of the best horses in the world. And I just really enjoy it. You can be pretty creative with announcing. I think all announcers develop their own style. I definitely have a style that is not much like a lot of the other eventing announcers, probably a little different than definitely a little different than other show jumping announcers as well. We all develop our own style, and people kind of get used to it and expect it. But it's just really, it's a great way to be connected with the sport that we love and get to see. I have been really lucky to get to do, a number of really big events: Olympic Games, Pan American Games, World Championships, World Cup finals. And I get to see the best horses and riders in the world competing, and there's nothing better than that. And then I get to talk about them and really say whatever I want. So that's also kind of fun.
Yeah, that's neat. And how do you decide? You talked about sort of the research you had done after, before your first Kentucky. What goes into it before announcing for a competition?
Well, it's a lot that I did a lot of rules research just so I would actually know, what I was talking about, how the scoring worked, that kind of things, because that's a key component to announcing, to technical announcing for a sport. You can make quite a big difference in how it's going if you say things incorrectly or are not able to explain to those who are watching, and frequently to those who are actually participating. In the case of show jumping, announcers frequently are in the position of having to explain, briefly, succinctly to the competitor who's in the ring what actually may have just happened. And so you need to be quite familiar with the rules. And aside from that, it's just doing a lot of homework and really knowing who's competing, the riders, the horses. You don't need a huge amount of biographical information on all of them, but spectators really like to know a little bit about who they're watching. some of the key events that they've participated in, that they may have won, a little bit of info on the horses, their breeding, a little bit of breeding age, that kind of thing. It just makes it, I think, more fun to watch for people.
Yeah, definitely. Well, as I said, your voice definitely was in my memory for Kentucky for all those years. So, yeah. And I guess, do you have a favorite or a memorable event while you were announcing, or happening, or just something that stands out in your mind, whether it was like Kentucky or one of these other huge events like the Atlanta Olympics, or, and you mentioned the Pan Am Games. So you've been to the top.
Well, because it's so fresh in my mind, probably one of the most exciting things recently, anyway, was just this past year at Land Rover when Tammy Smith and My Bomb won. It was the first win for the U.S., for a U.S. rider since 2008 at Land Rover. And, she's a Californian, so very dear to my heart. And she is such a wonderful person, not only a great horseman, she's just a kind, caring person. I don't know her really well, but in the few times I've met her, she's just lovely. And, so that sort of stands out as being a real highlight, being able to be there when she won, and it was very exciting. And, all of the events have something that stands out and makes them just really special, I think.
Yeah. That was, Kentucky was just amazing. It was so, you like all the competitors to do well, but I think we're all, at least the U.S. riders, were all kind of U.S. spectators, and all of us there were hoping she would pull it out, and she did.
Sure. And, I've got to say, I think because of just comments that I heard from other riders there, or from riders who were also competing there, they were also rooting for her. She's a good person. And, it's exciting for the U.S. to have won it. It's exciting for her with that horse that she's done so much with to win. And I think a lot of her fellow competitors were just as thrilled for her when she had that win. It was a great day for sure. Great week.
Yeah, definitely. This is kind of a nuts and bolts question, but how do you learn to pronounce all the names of the riders? And the horses' names are very elaborate. They seem to be getting more elaborate.
Yes, they are. It's like I think everyone asks me that. And I speak a few languages, and I have sort of a knack for learning languages. I learned a second language when I was pretty young. And then when I was in my early 20s, I moved to Mexico and lived there for a number of years and learned that, speak that language also. That was my third language, speak that fluently. But I just sort of have a knack for languages. I think you develop that if you learn a second language when you're quite young, you sort of develop an aptitude for it. And it makes it pretty easy for me to figure out pronunciation of names. Though I will say that sometimes, probably shouldn't say this, now everyone will know. Sometimes I just make it up. I really don't know. And I can make a pretty good guess, but I just say what I think it should be with conviction and with a little bit of an accent. And I have people come up to me and say, I've had this horse for 2 years and I never knew that was how you pronounced his name. I'm like, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, that's it.
That's conviction. That sounds.
That's it. Say it with conviction and a little bit of an accent. People think I speak quite a few more languages than I actually do.
That's great. That's great. Well, that leads maybe a little bit in my next question. I'm not a person who is very comfortable speaking publicly, and I'm amazed that when you're announcing, you sound so effortless, educational, and entertaining. I guess how do you do it? And if you make a mistake in announcing, I think there's so many people out there who don't like public speaking, and it's a little like that. Like, how do you move past it?
Well, you know, I get very nervous actually right before when it's a big event, or if it's televised, or there's a big stadium with a lot of people. I get quite nervous right before starting. I think most commentators and announcers probably do. Um, but I sort of like the feeling of being nervous. It doesn't bother me. Um, but if I make plenty of mistakes. I do.
Uh-huh.
There are times when I won't, there are times when it maybe isn't appropriate to make the correction right in that moment because of the way the event is progressing or whatever. But if I make a mistake, I just correct it, laugh at myself sometimes. And I've
Mm.
made some really awkward mistakes, some funny slip of the tongue sometimes. Um, and you just move on. It doesn't bother me. It used to bother me a lot when I would do that, but now we're all only human, and mistakes happen, even on you know television, even when it's being live streamed, they still do happen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great advice for so many walks of life, different,
Sure,
different things happening.
it really
Um,
does.
yeah. One other thing is, often in our sport, people are so often focused on their own disciplines, and you've had the opportunity, obviously, hunter jumpers discipline is sort of your background, but eventing and dressage through announcing, and your other roles, which we're going to get into. I guess, what do you think of each of the different worlds, and what can the different disciplines learn from each other?
As I mentioned, my very first experience, well, I had the sort of peripheral experience at Young Rider Championships with eventing, but my first experience with eventing was at Land Rover. Um, and so I've been lucky enough to see the very best in both eventing, of course, in show jumping. Um, I've seen all of it. I've ridden, I competed professionally in as a show jumping rider for years. I was a trainer. So I've seen all levels in show jumping, but in eventing and dressage, I pretty much only have experience with the very, very top level of the sport, which is fantastic. I see um, amazing competition, amazing horses and riders. But I do feel like we could all benefit by learning a little bit more about each other's disciplines. I I think we all, and I know in show jumping, we tend to feel that the other disciplines maybe aren't, eventing and dressage I'm talking about, and particularly in eventing. I think quite a few show jumping people tend to think that maybe eventing riders um, don't quite have the level of expertise that they do. Maybe they don't care for their horses the way show jumping horses are cared for. And I think that everybody, especially at the high levels of the sport, really does themselves a disservice if they don't learn just a little more about what the other disciplines are doing, why they do it, what they do. You can learn a lot a show jumping person can learn a lot about conditioning. Obviously, we don't condition our show jumping horses in the same way. But
Mhm.
there's a lot of event horses that compete. My mom, a great example, I think he's 17. I might be
Mhm.
wrong. Don't want to quote me on that. I wouldn't be wrong if I were announcing it right now because I'd have it right in front of me. But I think he's
Yep.
17. Um,
Yep.
and they're incredibly physical athletes, more so than any other discipline, I think. And the the level of knowledge and expertise that high level eventing riders have is unparalleled. And the treatment of their horses is just unbelievable, how they care for their horses. I've never been so impressed. And show jumping as well. I mean, show jumping riders, dressage I'm not nearly as familiar with, but I'm sure the same level of care and quality of care goes into those. But I think we could all learn by sharing experience between the disciplines, and it's something that we tend not to do. I think we sort of, event riders more than others, since they ride the three disciplines. They, many event riders train with both pure show jumping trainers and pure dressage trainers, so they get a little more crossover. But show jumping riders and dressage riders, I think, tend to sort of silo themselves off and think of their sport as the only sport. I'm making a rash generalization, of course, but it's just the observations that I've made over the years, seeing all three of those disciplines.
Right. Very good points. Moving on, you are obviously, well, not obviously, but you're a licensed official in several capacities. And as we were chatting, last week, you're moving more into, the different other roles other than announcing. So I definitely want to chat about that. But, can you talk a little bit about, your different roles? You're an FEI level 3 jumper judge, an FEI level 1 steward. Well, you have your FEI level 1 steward license. You're an USEF Big R jumper judge, certified jumper schooling supervisor, and you're a clinician for USHJ Jumper Judges Clinic. So quite a few. But, for those, can you talk a little bit about what's involved with each and how you became involved?
Sure. Well, I started judging years ago, when I was very young, while I was still a professional rider, many years ago, and gave up my judge's license. I had actually, at that time, which was kind of crazy because I really rarely rode hunters. I was a professional, I was an assistant trainer for Larry Langer, who my mentor, I should say, Larry Langer, who I have worked with and for years. I was his assistant trainer, the assistant to his wife, actually, and they both encouraged me to get a judge's card. At that time, it was when I was 19. I actually got a hunter judge's card, hunter and equitation. Shortly after that, I moved out of the country and couldn't keep up my license because I couldn't judge. I lived out of the country for 8 years and I didn't want to come back to judge, so I gave up that license, which was also a good thing because I don't know much about hunters. I know a lot about them, but not enough to judge them.
Got it. Yep.
But as soon as I returned, I was still a professional rider when I moved back here, but I right away decided that I wanted to get a little more experience in other areas and got my jumper card. That was, I think, like probably 35 years ago, something like that. And I think it's very important, and I'm probably going on too much about this. Let me know if I am.
No, but all interesting.
For good show jumping announcers, it's, in my opinion, quite important to also be a judge. And most that I know are. I would have to say almost all. I can't, I'm sure there are some that aren't, and I'm sure they're good announcers also, but I can't actually think of any really top level show jumping announcers who are not judges. Because the sport is very technical, it's hard to be able to explain, number one, to spectators what's going on if you if you're not really clear on the rules. And to be clear on the rules, those who are most clear on the rules are judges. Just very quickly, a little aside to that is there was an incident, you'd have to be quite old to remember this, but at the World Cup finals in Del Mar, which I was assistant to Larry Langer for those World Cup finals, there was an incident that anyone who was there would remember, but it involved a rider who crossed through a start line inadvertently and then had an issue with now it being recorded as a starting. And she didn't want to leave the ring. Tina Kassan was her name, and it was quite a big thing at the time. But it became a huge thing because the announcer, and he's a very good announcer, and I in no way would hold him responsible, but he was an eventing and dressage announcer, much more familiar with those sports than with show jumping, and not really familiar with the show jumping rules. He wasn't able to explain well enough to the spectators what was going on. And in this particular scenario, she stayed in the ring for about 15 minutes. It was crazy. The stands, which were completely full, the people were yelling her name and chanting and stamping. It was wild. But the judging panel was very busy trying to figure out what to do and did not have time to explain to the announcer. And because he was not, and again, I want to say he is a very good announcer,
right,
but he wasn't that familiar with show jumping and wasn't able to explain clearly. So the crowd just went crazy. Anyway, it just sort of illustrates my point that I think show jumping announcing and judging are tied very closely. And I think the best announcers for show jumping are also judges.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that I had never thought of. Just the education that's involved. You understand it as needing to be a jumper judge, but yeah, for an announcer, there's just so many different scenarios that could happen, like the one you described at the World Cup that you would never have thought would come up. And
exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and if you can't explain it, and as I said, it's not just explaining it to the spectators, though that's very important, especially now, when things are live streamed. So the announcing may be going out over the live stream, and you want people who are watching to understand also what's going on. But there are instances where very quickly you need to be able to let the competitor know something and if you are not, really familiar with rules, you don't really have time, because the ground jury or the judging panel, are trying to take care of what they need to take care of. They may be discussing it. They may be, and it happens very fast. So they don't have time to tell the announcer exactly what to say. So the announcer needs to be really educated. Of course, they do not make a decision, without being certain that the judges are on board with it. But the judges need to be able to say really quickly, look, explain this. And if you don't have that kind of a background, it's very difficult to explain quickly, and in a way that you're not going to get somebody to do something they shouldn't in the ring. So it's just an important aspect, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And what, you've talked a little bit about it, but, in your role as a jumper judge, what can you kind of sum up what a jumper judge does? I mean, I think we all sort of have an idea, but love to hear it from you.
Well, we obviously were scoring the class, that's sort of the key part. Scoring and making sure that the rules are followed, and they're followed, to me. And I always, my husband and I give the USHJ jumper judges clinics along with David Disler, Ralph Alfano, Jenny Koenig. But my husband and I partner when we do them. and we always really stress that what's so important, the scoring is important. You know, you have to know the rules. You have to know what you're doing with scoring. You have to be able to react very quickly, and to make sure that there's always a really even and fair playing field for everyone. You know, and I think that's one of the most important factors, and something that when you're judging is so key, that you treat everybody the same. Everybody has you know, your responsibility is to make sure they're scored fairly, correctly, that the rules are applied equally to everybody. And I also think the feeling of that we judges really want everybody to do really well. You know, that's why we do this, because we love show jumping, we love the sport, we love horses, and we want, for us, I mean, I would not want everyone to be clear. It'd be pretty boring, and you wouldn't want to keep competing. But we really want everyone to succeed and do well when they're in the ring. And I worry sometimes that some judges, you know, maybe who are having a bad day or who've done it for so long they're sick of it, whatever, that they sort of develop a little bit of a us against them. Oh, I'm going to show those riders. Oh, I'm going to, you know, and it really isn't that. It's key, I think, in judging, that we all want a great outcome. That's why we do this. You know, that's the whole reason that we're involved.
Yeah, that's a good point. And even I've talked to like Jeff Teal in judging, and he says very similarly, like, we want the riders to do well. That's, you know, that's why we're doing it, not because we want to penalize them or, so I think that is a really, really important part.
Exactly. Yeah. And Jeff he's such a wonderful hunter judge, you know, and I don't know him really well, but I know him, and his, that level of experience. It's so great to hear that he feels that same thing. You know, it really is. We want good sport. You know, that's why we all do this. We want good sport. We want a great outcome. And that's why we're here.
Right.
I think it is. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but one final thing that I think is important about judging is also educating competitors. You know, we talk about it in the clinics about if there's something complicated, a class that has complicated rules, you know, and there are, that you don't try to catch them like, oh, I know they're never going to understand this, so we can eliminate them for that because they didn't understand what they were doing. You know, have a little rider meeting before you start. Or if you don't do that, go down in the ring and make yourself available while they're walking in case anybody has questions about how it might be scored. You know, confusing classes, gambler's choice, or take your own line, or, you know, rotating rider relays, or anything like that you don't do frequently and that can be confusing. You know, educate them and make sure they know what it is. And if somebody does something wrong when they're in the ring, which does happen, and you have to eliminate them for it, you know, if they've done something quite wrong, I like to tell them exactly what it was. You know, I will frequently ask the person at the in-gate, hey, have them come over here, because I want, even if it's something that I'm not angry, I shouldn't say, but that they've done, you know, something that's really not allowed and they shouldn't have done, I have them come over and I explain, hey, look, this is what you did. Don't do it again, and this is why. Especially to young people. To professionals, not so much. I mean, if they've done something inadvertently, I might tell them, but to kids, you know, juniors and amateurs, you know, let them know. Sometimes they really don't know what they were doing, why they shouldn't do it.
Right. Yeah. And that, you know, I think you've sort of answered that, but, you know, one of my questions is going to be, what are some things, you know, that you see in this role that maybe you see often enough that would help exhibitors, either be better exhibitors or, I guess just be better exhibitors. Is there anything you see frequently?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think the biggest is that they just don't know what the rules are.
Mm.
And our rules are not that complicated, but they do change frequently. Every year there's some kind of rule change that will affect competition. And but even without them changing, just they need to familiarize themselves. The jumper section of the rule book is not very long compared to the hunters and equitation. It's short.
Uh-huh.
And they need to know what they're doing. Professionals need to be very familiar, explain to their students, but it's not all on the professional. If you're going to be competing, you can read. You should read the rule book and know what the rules are for the class that you're going in, because a lot of people don't, and they end up, getting themselves eliminated or getting faults when they shouldn't, just because they don't know. They don't understand the rules.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice, and everybody can do it too.
Yeah,
it's
not hard.
Right.
I will say I probably know more about eventing rules than most of the eventers do.
Oh, wow.
Just because I'm that way. I want to know.
That's a really good point. I think it's probably something people overlook. Just assume they're going to hear it from their trainer or do what everybody else is doing and hope for the best.
Sure. And in that comment, I just want to be clear also, I don't mean that as a slam on eventers. I mean it as a slam on everybody. Show jumping people, I know that I know more about the rules, but I should, because I'm a show jumping judge, I'm a clinician, I run horse shows, so I should know more about the rules in show jumping. But in eventing, I do very little of it, so I really shouldn't know more than all of them, but I do because I study it.
Right.
Across disciplines, people are not very good at making sure they know all the rules.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really great advice. I think it kind of just makes sense. If you're going to participate, then
sure.
Yeah, just look it up in the USEF rule book, and that's great advice. Do you ever, as a licensed official, it just seems like there's a lot of pressure there. There's a lot of pressure to get it right, to get decisions right. Do you ever get nervous, or how do you prepare for?
No, I wouldn't say nervous, really. Maybe a little bit. There is, for all classes, you want to make sure you get it right. I mean, everybody deserves. They're all, there showing, and everybody at any level deserves to have, someone knowledgeable and someone, who will do the right thing in different instances. But definitely in higher level, bigger, really important classes that are qualifying for, World Cup finals, Olympic Games, World Championships, when you're, or in those championships themselves, judging that. I've, of course, never judged an Olympic Games, but I have been on ground jury for World Cup finals. And it's a big thing. You don't want to make a mistake. And so maybe not nervous as much as just really sort of heightened senses and being extra alert, and, just really wanting to make sure that you do the right thing. And, what we always tell people in the clinics is judging. We get a lot of people who've never judged before. They're just applying, and this is their first go round. Judging is really kind of 90, maybe almost 95% kind of boring, and then 5% of sheer panic because something crazy has happened, And right in that moment, you have to figure it out, decide, make a decision that could be, you don't want it to be wrong. Yeah. So
right.
it's, you can get lulled into a sense of, oh yeah, it's all easy. And all of a sudden, all heck breaks loose in the ring. We're like, oh my gosh, what just happened?
Right. Oh gosh. Definitely, that's a good point. And then
I'm nervous, not so much. I get much more nervous announcing than I do judging.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, you have your FEI level 1 steward license. What's involved with that, and how did you decide to get into that?
Well, I don't really steward very much. I steward probably once a year. It's not I enjoy it. It's not that I don't enjoy it, but I prefer judging or announcing when I'm at a horse show, mainly because I like to watch the competition. I enjoy watching the warm-up ring, which is a lot of stewarding. But I like to watch horses and riders compete more than the rest of what's involved in stewarding, though I do enjoy stewarding. People kept telling me we need a lot more FEI stewards, because a lot of stewards are required at FEI events. You have to have at least 5 at every event, and there are a lot more FEI events in our country than there were, and we're getting more every year. So I figured I might as well, just in case somebody, really I have it just in case somebody's in a bind and needs an extra steward. I can do it. It's not something that I don't really look for work as a steward. I keep it just in case, somebody, I'm free and somebody needs someone that week. Otherwise, I don't really do much stewarding.
Yeah. One thing that it sounds like you do a lot of, and you'd mentioned you're a horse show manager, and it sounds like you started early and with Larry as your mentor. So maybe can you just talk a little bit, how did that evolve?
Sure. Larry is how it evolved. He was actually my trainer when I was my last junior year. Then I worked for him and we became good friends. I've been friends with him. I was, as I mentioned, I lived out of the country for a number of years. When I returned, he helped me sort of get settled. I got a couple of riding jobs, opened a barn for a short time, and then had the property got sold and all. And I was at a bit of a loss because I had been back here, I guess like 2.5 years, I think, and had opened my own barn and was going pretty well. But the property then got sold where I was housed. And I just thought, God, didn't want to go through that again of trying to figure out where to go. And Larry said, well, there's always horses you can ride here. He was based at the LA Equestrian Center at that time. You can ride, here, but why don't you come and work for me, doing horse shows? And so I started out working in the office and assisting who he had, his show secretary at that time. I assisted her. And that's how I started announcing as well. One day, one of the announcers couldn't show up, I can't remember now what happened, but he couldn't make it. Mike Moran, a wonderful announcer. And Larry said, I was in the office and he said, okay, go out there and announce. And I'm like, well, wait, what? And I said, Dad, it's fine. It's jumpers. It's what you can do it. You'll be fine. And I just liked it. I think as I remember, he was out actually for 3 days, the last 3 days or 4 days of the horse show. So I did the whole thing and everyone said, oh, wow, you have such a pretty voice and you seem to like this and you're good at this. And I thought, well, what the heck? So, but that's how I started also managing horse shows. I
Yeah.
worked with Larry, in the office doing all different aspects, and just sort of eased into it. He was kind of easing out of being so hands-on as the manager. He wanted to be at the horse shows, but he didn't want to be doing all the day-to-day management, the scheduling, etc. And he continued showing me how he did it and what to do, and then sort of said, all right, there you go. I'll be here. You run the show. And
wow.
so I just sort of eased into it that way and started running some of our shows in LA. I did for a short time. I ran some of our Northern California horse shows also, but for many years I've run the horse shows that we put on at the Colorado Horse Park.
Right. And what are some things, obviously when we're showing, we know about the horse show managers, but like what all is involved with that, especially things people might not think about?
Involved with horse show management?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, I think everybody can, sort of, it's from the hiring of all the officials, from the deciding what classes to offer. Of course, there's the normal classes that there are some that you have to offer, and then the normal classes that you always offer, but deciding what will work better in what area for the demographic that you have at those particular horse shows. The deciding how much prize money you want to offer, which is an interesting thing to me anyway. You can pass what for me, I can go up to a certain amount of prize money. Everybody always says, oh, we want more prize money. Oh, we need more prize money. But sort of depending on the demographic and the area that you're in, if you go, well, fine, I'm going to offer tons of prize money, you actually sort of do a disservice almost to the people in your area, because you may have been gearing the horse shows not necessarily to just local competitors, but to a local group, and offering too much prize money, you may, entice a lot of other people to come. That, yes, it's always great to have more people at your horse show, but is it the best thing for your base group of people to have all of them come? So a lot of there's a lot involved, a lot of what you sort of want to think about when you're planning. And then of course there's, the normal technical stuff, getting the footing that you need, getting the grounds the way you want them, making sure the stabling is all that you need. Now the biosecurity issues are overriding, and I mean, so important. And it takes a lot of logistical management to do that correctly, and to keep everybody, horses and competitors, of course, safe and healthy while they're at your event. And so
it seems like that. Yeah, the biosecurity would have added a whole nother level of management, really.
Oh yeah. I mean, we during COVID, we actually had a biosecurity consultant helping us, and setting up all of our protocol. And we were very lucky in Colorado. We were able to, we didn't have to cancel too many of our horse shows, and we're able to move forward. And because of the environment and the way the facility is laid out, we were able to hold, safe horse shows for competitors. But we had a biosecurity consultant work with us the whole year.
Wow.
To make sure that we did everything as well as we could. And now we sort of have the same now, a horse biosecurity consultant. We're really lucky. The new owners of the Colorado Horse Park are a veterinary group, and so biosecurity is, key to them, of course. And so I have built-in biosecurity management. I mean, they're wonderful people as well, but great veterinarians, and always, you know, on top of everything with us. You know, we implement it, but I get so much advice from Dr. Kelly Tischer, who is the principal, and his whole group at Littleton Equine and Singletree Equestrian, which are the owners of the property. They, you know, I feel so safe. I feel really lucky that we have them there on site and helping with all our biosecurity protocols.
Yeah, that's what a great thing to have. I mean, they obviously get the whole importance of it more than anyone. So,
and you know, and sorry that my last little bit on this, but what you just said sort of made me think of it. It's difficult at facilities. If you don't own a facility and you just are renting to put on your horse show or something, facility owners don't necessarily understand a lot of that. And it can be very difficult. It's a really hard part of horse show management, dealing with facility owners generally, not because they want to be difficult, but they just may not understand everything that you need and what they could do to help you with it. But in our case, now, as of last year, we are so lucky to not be in that position. At the Colorado Horse Park. It's just, I mean, I feel so lucky because I have worked at a lot of facilities where it's really an uphill battle to keep things safe, in good condition, all of that, safe for horses, safe for riders. It's hard at a lot of facilities, but not for us.
Yeah. Yes, so very lucky. That's neat.
Yes.
That's neat. I guess a similar question to what I asked about the judges, you know, what are some things you see in your role as a horse show manager that would help exhibitors be better exhibitors?
Well, I think there's any number of things, you know what you're doing, read the prize list, be familiar with what our rules are. They're different than rules at other places, you know, and I get it. It's hard because everybody does things differently, but, you know, try to make sure that you know. But really, the biggest thing for me is if they have a problem or if they need to talk to me. You know, they don't, and a lot of competitors, a lot of exhibitors are hesitant to go directly to the horse show manager. You know, they may talk to the steward, they might talk to the person at the in-gate, they might talk to the trainer in the next aisle over with their grievances or their issues or a problem that they're having. But really who they need to talk to, the best person to talk to is me. And I try to make sure everyone knows that. And obviously I can't be available 24/7 to every single person, but there aren't that many huge issues. And if I don't know what's going on, if I don't know that there's a problem or that people aren't happy with something or any number of things, I can't fix it. And end of the day, I'm really the one who needs to fix the problems. I being the manager, not just me personally. The manager of the horse show is the one who, it all ends there. So
you're right.
Talk to the manager. You know, don't be afraid. Oh, I was afraid to come tell you. Don't be. Just do it. It's the best way to get anything taken care of. Go right to the person who can take care of it.
Yeah, that's great advice because I think, like you said, most of us are probably like, well, I don't want to bother you, or I know you're really busy, or just think of a show manager as not being approachable.
Right, and you're absolutely right. That is the thing. They always say, well, I really didn't want to bother you. I know you're busy, but you're not bothering. It's why we're here. We are here to make the show work well for everybody. And one last, I know I'm going on a lot, but one last thing that's so key for exhibitors to remember is even when you do come to me or when you do come to the manager, we won't necessarily make a change just because that's what you want. will definitely listen and take it into consideration. But what really people need to remember is that our job is to make the event the best it can be for the majority of the people who are there. And there will always be some people who don't think that the answer was the one they wanted, so it wasn't right, or don't think that, this was going well, or this should have been scheduled that way, and this would have worked better another way. And we need to not do it just because it's better for one person. We have to look at what's best for the majority of those who are competing, the safest, the best, the most comfortable, the schedule that works the best for the most people, even if it's terrible for one person, because that person can't get out of work until 3. They think the class should go at 4, so it's terrible, and the manager wrecked the whole show for them because they held the class at 2. But actually, the other 20 people, it worked better for them at 2. And that's, I think, important for everyone to remember that we do the best we can for the most people and the most horses.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kind of wrapping up, getting towards the end, you're also very involved in sports governance. I guess, how did you become involved in that? Why do you think that's important?
Well, again, that's Larry Langer. He made me. He said, you must be involved in governance. If you want things, do not complain that you don't like this. You don't like, the USEF just passed this crummy rule and I don't think it's right for the horse show. Or the USHJA just did this and I don't think that's right. He said, you may not complain about all of that unless you are involved and making yourself part of the process. And so he sort of pushed me into it to start with. But it's something I really enjoy. I mean, it probably takes more time now. I'm involved in a lot of different areas of governance, but I think it's really important to, be a part of the process, be a part of deciding how it should go and looking out for our horses, our people, our horse shows, our venues, all of it. I hope that my involvement helps with that, and that's why I do it.
Yeah. As you mentioned, governance of anything is challenging. Trying in this case, trying to move the sports sports forward. With what I'd imagine are strong personalities with various opinions. I guess, what's that like? Trying to get a consensus, I guess.
Well, since my opinion is always the correct one, it's not hard.
There you go. Simple.
No, you're spot on. That is the most difficult part, forming a consensus. And I think being willing to compromise, we can't all get it done exactly the way we want it, and accepting that will happen, and that the end goal, we all want the same thing at the end of the day, all of us on a board or all of us on a committee. As long as we identify what we're trying to do, probably most of us will have different ideas on how to get there, and just being able to, and I will say I am not always the best at being, I am very outspoken, and I'm probably, I can get kind of riled up when I feel very strongly about something, but I like to think that I have learned to, take a step back. Okay, wait a minute. I'm going to listen to what everyone else is saying and not be so set and so sure that this is the way it has to go. And as you said just a moment ago, reaching a consensus on the right way to move forward with something or the right direction to go is key. and the only way that you can get anything done, I think.
Yeah. And is there, or are there any particular achievements that you've been part of in governance that stand out to you or that you're proud of?
One thing that I worked on very hard, starting with David O'Connor a number of years ago. It was when he was still president of the USEF, and Bill Maroney was president of USHJA, and they put together at David's encouraging, he put together really a group to create I don't even remember what we were called. It was a competition standards. I don't know if we were a task force or what we were. I don't even remember. It was quite a long time ago. But to a group to get together and start to put together standards for facilities, mainly for facilities, and standards for how competitions should be run, because there was nothing at that point. There was nothing anywhere that said, a stall should be this size, or I mean, nothing. Or if you're going to have 500 horses, you must have X number of wash racks. You must have light. I mean, there were a few things. I shouldn't say there was nothing. There were a few rules about lighting and I don't even remember now. But anyway, the formation of competition standards, I think, that's I think the biggest project that I worked at from the outset. I'm still on. I chaired the USHJA Competition Standards Committee for a number of years. I'm still on that committee, but it was a huge project that we worked on over a number of years, and it's still, it still is being changed and adjusted and tweaked as need be. But I think that's one of the biggest things that.
Yeah.
There was something that I'm very proud of. I had, because I worked very hard with a lot of other people, but on that for a number of years.
Yeah, that's really cool, because that's, again, another thing most people probably don't think about, how standards are set or why they were set, and they just enjoy the benefits of that.
Right. Exactly right.
And lastly, just to wrap it up, kind of a fun question. What advice would you give your younger self?
Well,
especially you having done doing so many things, so many different things, which I think is really, really cool.
I probably would and it's going to sound very cliche, because I think it's what a lot of people think, especially when you're at an advanced age like mine. But, don't be so, I would have told myself then, slow down. Do not be so quick to want, everything to happen and to get better faster, and to, show a bigger horse shows faster and to have better horses. Just take it easy. It will all come. You can just relax, try not to. I was pretty driven. I still am, but more so when I was very young. And I didn't take a lot of time to really enjoy the moment. I was just so driven on doing better and going somewhere and getting this done. I maybe didn't. I mean, I really enjoyed everything I did, but I could have sat back a little bit when I was younger, I think.
Yeah.
Though, one thing I do just want to say is I think I am luckier than so many people to not only get to do what I love to do and be involved, in this sport, which I love, but I get to do so many different things that it does. I mean, and they're difficult. And sometimes, of course, I hate doing some of them. There are days when I'm like, oh my God, I do not want to do this right now. But I get to do different things all the time. If I had to only manage horse shows, 40 weeks a year, I'd go crazy. Or if I had to only judge horse shows 40 weeks a year or however many. I mean, I know judges who judge almost every single week. I couldn't stand it. Or if I had to announce, and I know announcers who do that, who might do 35 or 40 weeks a year. I couldn't do it. I don't think I would continue to enjoy it. So I'm just so lucky that I get to do all of them. And I don't really get tired of any of them.
Yeah. Well, that's what I just find fascinating about you, that you've sort of been able to piece together, similar but different roles, in our sport. And I just think that's really neat.
Well, it's fun. I'm lucky to get to do it. Privileged to get to do it, honestly. And I've had a lot of great people who have taught me. Larry Langer, of course, stands out, but a lot of others who have helped me with the judging, with the announcing, with all of it, and with the riding. When I still rode, I had amazing people helping me there as well. And so I'm lucky, I guess. Lucky person.
But I guess what's the saying, you also create your own luck. And it sounds like you've done that too, being open to different things and trying different things for sure. So
sure.
So very cool. Well, thank you so much, Charlotte. This has been a really interesting conversation. And I'm just so happy we're able to get together.
Thank you, Sandy. It's been really fun. I appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to this week's conversation with Charlotte Skinner-Robson. And a big thank you to the episode sponsor, Purina Animal Nutrition. You can subscribe to the Practical Horseman podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. While you're there, please rate and review the show. Also, tune into our mini-sode series, The FOD Pod, where you'll hear audio lessons from our favorite Equestrian Plus video clips. When you tune into the FOD Pod, listen close for a promo code for 15% off your Equestrian Plus subscription. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Sandy Olenek, and you've been listening to the Practical Horseman podcast.